All right. I am here with Doug Lichterman, my guitar teacher, and a fascinating guy who's got an incredible story about his life in music, particularly around the San Francisco scene of the 1970s, where your band opened for which big groups?
Oh, we were an opening act for Journey and for Jerry Garcia and for the Sons of Champlin. Bunch of big bands out there.
And Jefferson Airplane as well?
We never opened for the Airplane, but we knew them.
Yeah. So Jefferson Airplane, knowing them in that moment, what was the moment in San Francisco, by the way? What was the timing with which you got to San Francisco?
So I got to San Francisco in 1972 in the fall.
Okay.
And so the Summer of Love was 1967. So that was kind of when San Francisco blossomed into, the city of love.
Interesting.
And peace and love.
Yeah.
And by 1972, it had gone through a few changes, and it had gotten a little harder edge.
Yeah.
There were some, like the bad kind of drugs had gotten into the Haight-Ashbury.
Yep.
And so there was like a little more crime. It was not quite the peace and love scene that it's started out as, but it was still amazing, and as a music scene it was phenomenal.
So the music scene continued to flourish long after the Flower Children left town.
Oh, the San Francisco music scene is still flourishing.
Yeah, right. Now, speaking of the bands that flourished at that time, remind me, what was your band's name?
My band was called Window.
Okay. Now, what was it like just to be in that moment, Doug, among folks like, the Grateful Dead you're mentioning?
Well, that's why we moved to San Francisco. There were two reasons why I moved to San Francisco. One was called the Grateful Dead, and the other was the Jefferson Airplane. And my plan when we moved to San Francisco was hopefully to just become Jorma Kaukonen, the lead guitarist from the Airplane, or have a parallel career. So, the Airplane was huge in San Francisco, and the Grateful Dead was huge, and there were other bands, Quicksilver Messenger Service. There were a lot of different bands that were active on the scene, and my band was a popular local band.
Okay.
That's like the level we got to.
Okay.
We never became a national act. We had one album out.
Okay.
And but it was great to be playing. We made a living playing music, and we played several nights a week in clubs. So we didn't have day jobs, so we could rehearse or do whatever we wanted to do in the daytime.
What was it about, you mentioned Jorma, the guitarist for Jefferson Airplane, later with Hot Tuna. What was it about Jorma's guitar playing that drew you like that?
Oh, he was just an electrifying guitar player. He had his amps turned up to 10 and was playing these huge screaming lines with beautiful tone. Jorma's great. I mean, he started out as a folk guitar player, and I was a folk guitar player too. And he moved into electric playing with the Airplane. But before the Jefferson Airplane played at shows, he would come out and just sit on a folding chair and play acoustic guitar, folk music, for half an hour.
Wow. You mentioned tone. Who were the guitarists in that time period that you thought had the best tone in the business?
Best tone in the business, Jimi Hendrix, number one. He just, freaked everybody out with the kind of tone he got. And so everybody copied that. Eric Clapton had really good tone, I think, with Cream. Definitely, and Jerry Garcia, beautiful, kind of a more pristine sound. Those are the ones that stick out to me. Okay.
Now, before you arrived in San Francisco, you were born and raised in Detroit. Do I have this chronicle correct?
Yeah.
So even younger, before you get to San Francisco, can you tell me sort of your journey of falling in love with music and seeing the Beatles live eventually?
Well, I think I was born in love with music, really. Because there are pictures of me at age 2 with a drum, But I love music. I started playing music really seriously in 4th grade. I became a violinist, and I played in the orchestra, in the school orchestra. my mother loved classical music, so she played classical music nonstop in the house all day long. And my dad loved big band music, like Benny Goodman, and so we listened to a lot of that. I was really into Gene Krupa.
Nice, of course.
And so, yeah, and when I was growing up in Detroit, I mean, I was in my first band the summer between 6th and 7th grade.
Okay.
I was the drummer. And it was great. You know, we listened to the radio and we played whatever was on the radio. And we were terrible, but really loud.
Yeah.
And we got the one gig there was to get the 7th grade dance.
Oh, nice. Now, you mentioned, was it an aunt that I think you said 1966, took you to that Beatles show in Detroit?
So, yes, the Beatles came to America and they were on the Ed Sullivan Show. And that changed, you know, all of music, everything. You know, all of a sudden, Elvis Presley, the camera shifted to the Beatles.
Yeah.
And the Beatles and then all the rest of the English bands that came following right after them took over the whole scene. So the Beatles came to Detroit, to Olympia, which is where the Red Wings played. And, you know, we were dying to see them. Somehow, my parents, I guess, got us tickets. And my brave aunt, Ellen Lichterman, took us to this, just what must have been complete pandemonium. I mean, it was pandemonium.
Yeah.
And it was wild. You know, I just remember seeing the Beatles, and seeing the Beatles was what we really did, because you couldn't hear anything but wild screaming. And then up in the front of the auditorium were the Beatles playing.
Who, as the story goes, couldn't even hear themselves playing amid all of the...
It was really hard. They stopped touring because it was pointless.
Yeah.
It wasn't about music, you know, at that point.
How did you mention the Beatles being on Ed Sullivan change music? In what ways are the most substantial ways that the Beatles
Well,
did that?
everything was this very sappy pop before that. You know, My Boyfriend's Back, that kind of songs. They were all pop songs.
Yeah.
And the Beatles, even though their music was pop too, somehow they had figured something else out about conveying emotions, you know, and being more sincere in their lyrics in a way than the songs we were hearing. I think that was something. They looked completely different. They had really developed sound. I don't think most American bands had spent a lot of time playing together before they got a record deal. The Beatles spent 10 years just honing their craft in some cavern in, you know, Liverpool.
Yeah.
Or in Germany, I forget the cavern.
Well, the Hamburg shows are legendary.
I guess that's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, the Beatles, you know, they really changed everything. They changed everybody's perspective. And just like Jimi Hendrix changed everybody's perspective.
Interesting. Now, at what point in your musical journey did you end up learning from one of Chick Corea's bandmates on Return to Forever? I think
that's Bill Connors.
Okay.
So, Window was a progressive rock band.
Okay.
And we were kind of in the genre of, you know, not quite like Yes and Rush. We were a little more rock, a little less like quite that techno. But we played things in odd time signatures, and we were very exploratory with our composition. We played all original music. And I'm really proud of the music we did. But at the end of Window, when we just kind of had done everything, everybody else was getting interested in doing other things.
Yes.
My favorite guitar player was Bill Connors on this record, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, which was the first electric Chick Corea album.
Okay.
Then it was just mind-blowing guitar playing. Super technical, but very soulful. And my other guitar player, Joseph, knew that I loved Bill Connors, and he comes home one day with this piece of paper that he got at the music store. It says Bill Connors with a phone number on it.
Wow.
I said, what the hell is that? He says he's in the area and he's teaching. So he lived in this crazy place, Bolinas, which was like a half-hour, 45-minute drive south of San Francisco.
Okay.
in a house he, I don't know, was renting or something. Bolinas didn't like people. They were very unfriendly to strangers.
Okay.
So they took all the street signs down. There were no street signs in Bolinas. So the directions he gave me to come meet him were like,
useless.
go a third of a mile and turn right where you see 3 rocks. But yeah, so I went and I had to audition for him, which meant just, I guess, demonstrating I could play it all.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, it was great. He was amazing. He totally changed everything about my playing, and I studied with him for 7 years, and it was just an amazing experience.
What interested you specifically in the progressive rock genre?
So, progressive rock, progressive, the word really means in music, it means just moving forward with new original music. That's what progressive is, as opposed to just settling into some established style and playing that. So, the bands like Yes and Rush are bands that I think of as prog bands.
Yeah.
They were just combining elements from a lot of different kinds of music, a lot of classical music, and I like that because I had a classical background.
Okay.
And they emphasized technique, which I liked. And the composition was just much more imaginative.
How long were you in your band in San Francisco?
So we started in 1972 and we stopped playing around the end of 1978.
At which point the next journey in your life somehow eventually comes into view, which was going to New York?
No, well, I started a band called Thursday. It was originally Thursday Quintet.
Okay.
In San Francisco. That was my first jazz group.
Oh, okay.
And that's when I met Clayton Englar, who was my sax player. Still is my sax player.
Wow.
And I knew I wanted to play jazz. I wanted to play, or something like jazz.
Yeah.
I just wanted to play music that was technically demanding and really interesting to me. And so that was the allure of it. And I needed to find a whole new set of people to play with who just were in that headspace. Because my bandmate informed me that he was going to start an anti-music band. They were really very musical, but they were called Factrix.
Okay.
And they had videos with, chainsaws and stuff, and played this very, what you call industrial sound. Okay. Beating on metal objects and stuff combined with synthesizer sounds and guitar generated sounds and vocals.
So you get into jazz then. Is it with that group that you ended up going to New York, or like at what point were you
I was kind of getting tired of San Francisco. We had been there for 8 years, and I felt like I had done everything I could do there that I wanted to do. Like there was nothing else left that I could do that I wanted. What I really wanted to do was go to New York, where all the jazz, everybody in jazz was there. So my saxophone player, who was essential, my main other person in Thursday group, we became finally.
Okay.
Was moving to Washington, D.C. because his wife was a lawyer and she got a job in D.C. So he was telling me, I'm moving to D.C. I guess it's over. Yeah. And I said, well, this would be a great opportunity for me to move to New York. So I did. I moved to New York in 1980. And he was in D.C., but we started playing in New York. We formed the band Thursday Group with a fantastic drummer and bass player. And we started performing in New York, and when we would have gigs, Clayton would just come down. So that was quite the commute from D.C. to New York. Of course. Or come up, I guess.
All for love of the music, huh? Wow.
But we did our first album, Thursday Group, and it was just completely self-promoted. We couldn't get a record deal. I tried to get a record deal, and at that time, jazz was on the decline. Like, as a matter of fact, when I first moved to New York, there was a Beacon jazz station. I can't remember the call letters of it, but it was just like one of the hugest national jazz stations. And overnight it turned into a country station.
Oh, wow.
That was like about a month after I got to New York.
Wow.
And so the record companies, they had just figured out that like Michael Jackson could sell 1 billion albums.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, what do we need the jazz department for? What is the jazz department doing? A big selling jazz record sells 50,000 records.
Yeah.
You know, Michael Jackson sells 50,000 records a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there was a lot of pressure to just like, you know, the jazz departments were getting their budgets cut. And there were people like George Butler at CBS who stood up for jazz and kind of demanded that the labels keep doing it. But it was a bad time to get signed and we were not getting anywhere. So I just decided I'm just going to self-produce this record, start my own record company just for this record and promote it myself. So we recorded it and I think I was very excited by the record, and so I started promoting it to radio, and we got lucky and got a lot of radio airplay. Like, people liked it. And so we started getting radio play, and then when we got radio play, I would call record stores in that town and say, hey, we're on the radio. But as somebody else. Yeah. I assumed another character because I couldn't say we're great. I had to say they're great.
Okay, yeah.
But I would call, the record stores and say, this record's on the radio, why don't you order some? And they would order it. And then I'd call a club and say, hey, the record's on the radio and it's in the stores. The band's going to be on tour in your area. Let's book a gig. And I actually booked a couple of tours, like pretty big tours, 20 cities, stop tours.
U.S.
just
only?
Doing that. U.S. Oh yeah, U.S. Yeah. Driving around in a big van.
Wow. Yeah, that's the thing. Like you mentioned, a big jazz record selling 50,000 copies. How did you get by? I mean, were you like doing odd jobs on the side?
When I lived in New York, I had to have a regular job. Definitely, yeah. Playing music was not going to support me in New York.
Yeah.
I had an accidental career in market research.
Oh.
I got a part-time job doing telephone interviewing in San Francisco, and I just by showing up and doing my job, I was apparently an exemplary employee, and they kept promoting me and giving me, teaching me the business. So when I moved to New York and needed a job, I called the market research companies.
Okay, all right. So how long were you in New York then?
So 28 years.
Wow, 28 years.
Yeah, from 1980 to 2007.
Is that the point at which you came to Florida?
Yeah.
Well, what drew you to Florida?
So my wife and I were looking for some place to move. We could go anywhere because both of us, our jobs were freelance. She's a writer and an author, my wife. And I was at the time also writing books for, higher project, like books about guitar. And we were looking for some place to live, and we never go anywhere because we're both always working. So we wanted to live someplace that was like being on vacation. So we, dated a bunch of different cities by going there and spending a week there and trying to imagine ourselves living there. And we tried a bunch of different cities, and we came to St. Petersburg. Gab found St. Petersburg, and she said, I think this might be good. Let's book a longer trip there. We came down here, and it was great. We loved it.
How does the music scene down here compare to the music scenes of prior stops along the journey of your life?
The music scene in St. Petersburg is amazing. It's shockingly good, I would say, for the size town. But St. Petersburg, when I got here in 2007, on Central Avenue, there were boarded up stores.
I remember.
It was a very dusty, quiet feel. It did not feel like, a capital or Now they have these T-shirts, Paris, Tokyo, St. Petersburg. Yeah. But it's getting to be true. And there's an amazing art scene here, an amazing music scene, very talented people, national stature. A lot of people have gone national out of here, like Selwyn Birchwood and Damon Fowler.
Oh, wow.
There are a couple of people that occur to me who are from here. And Betty Fox.
Oh, Betty Fox is great, right? Yeah, local talent. There's that band. Is it Have Gun Will Travel, or a local band by that name? I can't remember. They're terrific too. I see them at a local festival, something like that. So, Doug, as you look back on your life now, I mean, do you have any regrets about devoting your life to music? Would you do it all over again? What stands out the most to you as you look back on this long journey through music that you've had in your life?
Well, it's been an incredible journey with the people and the experiences and getting to perform. I've always loved performing. You know, if I had to do it again, I'd try to be a little more successful at it.
Sure.
You know, in terms of getting the band to be a national band. But, you know, that's not really the most important thing. I see people playing here. I've even seen a couple of people at open mics who were just astonishingly good. And you look at these people and you think, this guy, if he was in the right place at the right time,
how important
could be, you know, like Chris Christopherson or something like that.
Yeah, because you mentioned, you know, the record labels, getting a record deal in like the early New York. How hard was it to get a record deal at that moment in the music business, and how does the importance of that compare to the importance of getting a record deal in 2023?
There's no comparison. It's a completely different planet. You had to get a record deal. Everything was dependent on getting a record deal. That was the only way you could become a national band, really. And so the whole game was getting to be a popular band and developing your craft and just spending all your time trying to approach A&R guys at record companies, trying to get a deal. In those days, if you got a deal, it really was a gateway to success. I mean, you had to really fuck it up for it not to work out. Because the record companies had a thing called artist development, where they would sign you to a 3-record deal. And you'd make your first album, and then they'd promote it to radio, and they'd send you out on tour as an opening act for one of their established bands. Then you'd make your second album, hopefully better. Hopefully you're building your audience, and more people are buying your record and coming to shows. And by the third album, you really should be a national band, at least a new national band. And after that, if it didn't work out, then they would consider, then you might get dropped.
And you told me getting dropped from a label was a kiss of death.
Well, it is pretty bad. Because if you get signed and then dropped, that means you've already been a problem somehow. Yeah.
So what makes the music business so different today?
Well, there's just no comparison. You absolutely don't need a record label anymore, because the reason you needed a record company was to promote your music to radio, which is where everybody heard music. And there was a whole machine to do that. And you needed distribution of physical product, like records, and which became cassettes and CDs and everything that followed that. Because you had physical product that had to be distributed all around the country, so that took a big network of distribution. So you couldn't really do that yourself very effectively. So, but now, and nobody even listens. The radio. The people listen to the radio, but more people listen to music on their computers and on their phones. Yeah. And anybody can load their music up now to the sea of music that's accessible by everybody on YouTube or all the different platforms. Sephora, is that it? And Pandora. Sephora, is that a store? Or is that,
it's Sephora, yes, is a chain.
Is that
What you mentioned the sea of people who are doing this, putting their music out into the ether.
This is the great thing, is that everybody has an equal shot now. That's very American.
Yeah.
And the counter to that is that there's just a sea of music because everybody is putting music out. So the world is awash in music, but that's great. And people listen to stuff, and when you listen on your phone or on your computer, the computer will just send you to something else randomly if you don't pick something. So you're exposed to, it's amazing, you're exposed to things you might have never listened to just because of this kind of shuffling of songs that phones and computers do.
Well, so in your opinion then, does the fact that today's music business, such as it is, right, is founded on this model of anyone being able to put their music out on digital platforms, does the volume of people doing that necessarily make it any harder to get noticed or to break out today than it was decades ago?
For sure. Because now you're a drop in an ocean of other things, and the amount of competition is geometrically bigger.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter, because the same, if you have talent and if you have persistence and you just keep plugging, you're going to succeed. To some degree, you will succeed. And Billie Eilish, for example, was just this girl and her brother in their bedroom. That's where they recorded their songs. Just in the bedroom on their computer.
Incredible. Yeah.
It is incredible. And she's one of the biggest stars.
Oh, as big as it gets now. Nominated for a Grammy Award, at least one this year for her song for the Barbie soundtrack. So.
She did that. I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
But I was amazed when she did a Bond song.
Yeah.
That was good.
Absolutely. Oh, she's incredible. Absolutely. Well, Doug, this has been wonderful.
Yeah, it's great. It's been fun, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for making time for me.
Thank you, man.